All right. Good evening, everyone, and evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are. These are those times now where we can join these debates from anywhere on the planet. Welcome to the Observer Research Foundation, and we are delighted to invite you to this special three-part series on Afghanistan, organized in collaboration with Her Afghanistan, which brings together academics, practitioners, and regional security and defense analysts to critically explore regional and global perspectives on the fast evolving political and security situation in Afghanistan and how events on the ground will implicate countries in the neighborhood and afar. And today is, I think, a very important topic that we are dealing with. We do have a tendency, specifically in India, to get embroiled with just three countries in the region. There are many more in the neighborhood and beyond, not far from the neighborhood. So today we are discussing the Central Asian and Iranian perspectives as far as the future of Afghanistan goes. And for the same, I would like to welcome our speakers, a very distinguished panel today, which is going to take us through a myriad of geographical interests, political interests, and regional interests. I will quickly start with a brief note on the Indian perspective, so to speak. As I said, we do get embroiled a lot with the three countries as far as Afghanistan goes, which is, of course, India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan itself. But there are many other neighbors to Afghanistan that have interests in a peaceful Afghanistan, have an interest in an economically vibrant Afghanistan, and have an interest in the long-term security of Afghanistan, which is, of course, Iran. We have Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, surrounding sort of the other periphery of the Afghan borders. And from an Indian perspective, of course, we have and continue to discuss Iran a lot. When it comes to Afghanistan, we have projects such as the Chabahar port in Iran, from which Afghanistan and Afghan economy benefit significantly. Trade has been increasing day by day using the port of Chabahar, and it is an important influx point and a strategic point for both Kabul and New Delhi. But of course, this goes beyond that. We are also talking about the Central Asian states today, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan, which don't get featured a whole lot as far as an Indian perspective on Afghanistan goes, which is a mistake. I think there needs to be a broader consensus via Kabul and not just between India and the Central Asian states on the security and safety of Afghanistan and what the future holds in the region itself. Central Asia is not geographically that far from India. I know a lot of Indian audiences specifically are not that well clued in to Central Asia's geographical realities to Afghanistan and the Afghan conflict. It's a mere 1 hour, 20-minute flight from New Delhi to enter Central Asia. It's very close by. And this is one of the very few debates where we have actually managed to collect such a stellar cast of academics and practitioners and experts who will talk about Afghanistan from a Central Asian perspective and an Iranian perspective, of course. I would just like to take 2 minutes to welcome our speakers today. We have Ahmad Shuja, who's the Director General for International Affairs and Regional Cooperation, Office of the National Security Council in Afghanistan. We have Akramjov Nematov, First Deputy Director, Institute of Strategic and Regional Studies under the President of Uzbekistan. We have Dr. Sultan Akimbekov, Director, Institute of Asian Studies, Kazakhstan. We have Anahita Nova, reporter, Iran International TV channel, Tajikistan. We have Adnan Tabatabai, co-founder and CEO, Center for Applied Research in partnership with the Orient. And equally importantly, my co-moderator today is Mariam Wadag of Her Afghanistan itself. So I'll hand over to Mariam to take this forward into the next stage. Mariam, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Kabir. Mr. Nematov, could you could you put yourself on mute? If you don't mind, thank you. So I'm gonna thank you so much for that fantastic introduction. There's no need for me to elaborate any further, so I'm gonna dive right into the questions. When we're gonna start with Iran first. So my question is straight directed to Adnan Tabatabai. Iran is playing a pivotal role in Afghanistan, especially in the post-Taliban development. It is a large source of foreign direct investment and provides assistance in critical national infrastructure, road construction, distribution of energy supplies, and agriculture and communication development. Iran also shares ethnic, linguistic, and religious links with Afghanistan. Adnan, could you please explain what is Iran's role in Afghanistan today? And what is Iran's role with the Taliban?
Thank you, dear Mariam, and thank you to both host organizations, to you, Mariam and Kabir, and the team behind you to set this fantastic panel up. And I am honored to be with you. I think it's important to think about Iranian ambitions, Iranian goals in Afghanistan. And I really have to say, as someone who is located in Bonn, where in 2001 Iran played a role in defining what was supposed to be the post-Taliban future of Afghanistan. Iran had its role in defining who could be running this country from Kabul. And I think up until this day, the primary priority number one for Iran is to keep Afghanistan as a republic. And I thought it was really interesting for you to put these two concepts of an emirate or a republic in your title. Iran is certainly, from all you hear from officials, interested in keeping Afghanistan a republic, in emphasizing the role of the constitution that was developed, in including all ethnic groups that define Afghanistan. Obviously, this priority is not always put in practice when Iran approaches the country. There have been unfortunate security concerns that have to do partly with Afghanistan itself, but also with Iran's relations to the US. And I think this is very unfortunate, because if there weren't these external impacts on Afghanistan, I believe Iran would wish nothing more than the territorial integrity of Afghanistan, a stable Afghanistan, in order to have good economic relations. You already pointed out that there are a lot of reasons for vibrant people-to-people relations between Iranians and Afghanistanis. And the border of 920 kilometers is unfortunately not only used for this kind of trade, but also for drug trafficking, human trafficking. And Iran has a vital interest in securing this border jointly with Afghanistan. And I think here is part of the issues that we are facing, that sometimes there is a lack of trust on either side as to what the government on both sides can manage to do in securing the borders. And then you sometimes have armed groups that come in between. And this is, in order to close my initial remarks with that part of your question, this is where Iran has, in my view, developed some very, let's call it this way, transactional relation with the Taliban to see where do the Taliban have the upper hand in regions that could either be a direct threat to Iranian territory or be a threat to Iranian economic interests or security interests. And this is when you would see some sort of transactional interaction happening between the Iranian state and the Taliban. Having said that, I still believe the emphasis is on keeping Afghanistan a republic. Let me leave it at that, and then we may come back to this if further clarification is needed.
I just want to dive into a bit here before I move on to our next panelist. There have been many alleged reports in the media regarding the former head of Taliban who was killed by a drone strike holding in Iran, and the fact that Iran is providing financial support. Iran is not the only one that has been alleged to provide financial support in the region to the Taliban. Is there anything that you would like to, do you believe that Taliban are a major stakeholder in Afghanistan and Iran should engage with them, or do you believe that Iran shouldn't engage with them?
In my assessment, and I mean my personal opinion doesn't matter that much as does my assessment on what the Iranian state is trying to pursue. I think we are seeing a consistent approach by the Iranian state into every single context of its neighborhood, that it tries to have relationship with the government in place, but also with a non-government or non-state actor that is powerful, either in the entire country or in certain provinces. And this is where the Taliban matter to Iran. I haven't heard a single Iranian official or non-official to view the Taliban as being the most powerful entity or the most powerful group that is supposed to run Afghanistan. But we are increasingly hearing people up to the National Security Advisor who says that Afghanistan has a legitimate role to play in the future of, the Taliban have a legitimate role to play in the future of Afghanistan. But I don't think that at any point Iran would see the Taliban as the major political force, but rather keep on emphasizing on the importance of the republic, of the government in Kabul, and the constitution. With regards to the flow of money here and there, I am not so informed, but I would say that it's certainly less, proportionately less than other financial support that the Taliban get, and therefore I think not that relevant.
Thank you so much. We'll come back to you. We're going to move along to the first deputy director, Mr. Nematov.
Yeah.
Central Asia contests boundaries have been known to smuggle weapons and drugs from Afghanistan. Now, religious extremism and radicalizations remain a major threat and destabilizing forces, such as the Taliban and Haqqani network, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan continues to endanger the regional security.
No.
I want to understand Uzbekistan's role in Afghanistan's political sphere, and should the Taliban be a part of a future government from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Dear colleagues, dear friends, I'm sincerely glad to see you all. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation to our Indian colleagues for the invitation to participate in this meeting. We are always ready to open dialogue dedicated to the stabilization of the situation in neighboring Afghanistan. Promoting peace in Afghanistan is a top priority of our foreign policy. In this regard, we are pleased to share our visions regarding the current situation in Afghanistan and the prospects of a peaceful settlement of the conflict in this country. First of all, I would like to emphasize that we consider Afghanistan as a fraternal country with whom we have been linked for centuries by the bonds of friendship, a common history, religion, customs, and traditions. Uzbekistan traditionally pursues friendly policy towards Afghanistan, supports the government elected by the Afghan people. This policy has acquired a complete, comprehensive, and dynamic character after the election of Mr. Mirziyoyev as the president of our country. The strengthening of good neighbor lines, friendship, mutual trust, and mutual understanding in Central Asia was declared as a key priority of Uzbekistan's foreign policy. At the same time, the president of Uzbekistan proposed to consider Afghanistan as an integral part of Central Asia. Most importantly, Mr. Mirziyoyev initiated a completely new approach towards Afghanistan. Afghanistan should not be seen as a source of threats, a hotbed of instability, but as an opportunity to change this country into a friendly, peaceful, and prosperous part of our common region. Peace and stability in Afghanistan will allow our countries to launch trans-regional projects in the field of transport, energy, trade, and strengthening the connectivity between Central and South Asia. This will become a powerful driver for the sustainable development in Central and South Asia. Moreover, joint economic development programs will help to achieve consensus among stakeholders on the need for a long-term peace in Afghanistan. An important practical contribution to stabilizing the situation in the neighboring country was the International Conference on Afghanistan, which was held in March 2018 in Tashkent by the initiative of the President of Uzbekistan and Afghanistan, Mr. Mirziyoyev and Mr. Ghani. The main outcome of this conference was the adoption of the Tashkent Declaration, which consolidated the approach of the global and regional levels on the need for an early start of direct negotiations between the government of Afghanistan and the movement Taliban. This forum was a logical continuation of the Kabul process and once again reaffirmed the leading role of Afghans themselves in resolving the conflict in Afghanistan. In this context, Uzbekistan welcomed the achievement of an agreement between the political leaders of Afghanistan on the creation of inclusive government and the High Council for National Reconciliation. We hope that the consolidation of all political forces around national interests will contribute to the early launch of an inclusive inter-Afghan dialogue and the end of the Afghan crisis. Today, in our opinion, it is important not only to consolidate the efforts of the world community to start the inter-Afghan negotiations, but also to achieve the preservation of the achievements of Afghanistan over the past 19 years. Moreover, the Afghan people themselves must decide the configuration of the political system of Afghanistan, the future nature and form of its state's construction. The main thing is that it should ensure inclusive political process, become a guarantee for achieving national harmony, sustainable peace, and long-term stability in the country. To achieve this goal, we think it's necessary to consider the following key factors. If you allow me, I will continue. First, the ethnic factor. Afghanistan is a multinational state with more than 35 million people and 20 nationalities. The most numerous peoples are Pashtuns, Tajiks, Uzbeks, and Hazaras, as you know. In this regard, in order to ensure the stability of the political system in Afghanistan, it's important to create political and legal conditions for the participation of various ethnic groups in the management of the state and society. Secondly, it's a confessional factor. As you know, Afghanistan is a Muslim country. According to the constitution, it's an Islamic Republic. However, in Afghanistan, there are also other denominations. About 80% of the population are Sunni, 18% are Shias, Hindus, and Sikhs also live in the country. In this respect, guarantees should be provided for the religious rights and freedoms of all citizens of the country in the future political system of Afghanistan. We are convinced that ensuring religious tolerance and inter-ethnic harmony is an important factor for stability in Afghanistan. Moreover, this will allow building good neighborly relations with the countries that surround Afghanistan. These are Iran, Pakistan, where a large number of Shias live. These are the countries of Central Asia, primarily Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan. Third, it's a social factor. Today, the role of Afghan women, who make up almost half of the country's population, has increased significantly in the social, economic, and political life of society. In this context, it's necessary to ensure their rights and interests in the future to create all conditions for the participation of women in public and state construction affairs. The importance of women's full participation in the life of the state and society is also enshrined in the Tashkent Declaration. adopted at the end of the International High-Level Conference on Afghanistan in March 2018. Fourth, the most important condition for stabilizing the situation in Afghanistan, along with the political settlement, is the integration of Afghanistan into regional economic processes. Today, the countries of Central Asia are actively involved in the socio-economic reconstruction of Afghanistan, implementing important infrastructure projects and continue to invest in the economic future of Afghanistan. In a joint statement that was adopted last November in Tashkent at the consultative meeting of the presidents of Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, Central Asian leaders reaffirmed their strong political will to promote Afghanistan's integration into regional economic and trade ties as an important condition for achieving a sustainable and long-term peace in the country. We are convinced that a more effective achievement of this goal will be facilitated through a common of the political and economic development models of Afghanistan and the countries of Central Asia. As you know, today the countries of Central Asia are building a democratic state of law with a market economy and open civil society. In this regard, Afghanistan's commitment to a democratic development will enable it to more successfully integrate the country in the Central Asia region and fully realize the potential of regional trade and economic cooperation for ensuring prosperity and welfare in our country. And fifth, the successful revival of the national economy of Afghanistan requires strong international support, primarily from countries that have significant financial and economic potential. At the same time, the United Nations should play a key role in consolidating the efforts of the international community in maintaining long-term socio-economic and financial stability in Afghanistan. In this regard, it is important to take into consideration the fact that the United Nations Security Council, which is represented by the leading countries of the world, China, Great Britain, Russia, United States, and France, in March of this year, adopted a resolution in which it opposed the restoration of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. In our view, a comprehensive consideration of the expectations of the international community will contribute to the establishment of Afghanistan as a fully fledged and predictable subject of international relations, and will increase the participation of leading countries in the post-conflict settlement of Afghanistan. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize once again that the future character of the political system of Afghanistan and the form of its government should be determined and chosen by the Afghan people themselves. At the same time, as we see, the above mentioned factors should be taken into account in order to achieve national harmony, sustainable peace, and long-term stability in the country. The main thing is that we cannot allow a situation that could turn a radicalization of society and actualize the problem of the concentration of terrorist groups and other destructive forces in the country. So I take this opportunity to once again note that our country is ready to continue supporting all efforts that are capable of making a practical contribution to the achievement of peace and prosperity in Afghanistan. I hope that our dialogue today will contribute to the development of recommendations to achieve this noble goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nemetov, for that holistic perspective and the fact that the Afghan people should determine whether the Afghan Taliban should join the government. Thank you so much. We're going to move forward to, if you could please put yourself on mute, Mr. Nemetov. I'm going to move to our next speaker, Anahita. Anahita, the Tajik-Afghan border has been, it was a short period where it was a battleground in 2018 when an unknown aircraft, possibly the Russians or Tajik, carried out an airstrike in Afghanistan Darqa district in Takbar province, killing 8 Taliban and wounding another 6. So I would like to understand, what is Tajikistan's perspective in the current political dynamics in Afghanistan, and how does Tajikistan recommend that Afghanistan should engage with the Taliban? Should they engage? Should they not engage, and why?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you. It's an honor for me to join you here and to talk about the Afghan problem. Stan, I think we had the very similarities in terms of we had our civil can very well. As you know, Tajikistan shares the longest border with Afghanistan, more than 1,000 kilometers. And of course, as my colleague mentioned about the future political structure of Afghanistan, it totally depends on Afghan people, but Tajikistan, as well as other international and regional actors, of course, is concerned about the developments in Afghanistan, because peaceful Afghanistan, it's about that in our region, peaceful Afghanistan will give us more benefits. As you know, Tajikistan is a landlocked country, and as my colleague from India mentioned, to have access to Chobahor port as well, it's important for Tajikistan to have access to the Indian Ocean. And I think what is more important here as well, it's about to talk about the CASA 1000. You know that Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, this project is still going on, and in future they want to sell the electricity to Afghanistan and possibly to Pakistan. Regarding this, the border clashes, of course, we hear every time, like now, you know, that the Taliban groups, they're close to the border, to the northern part, where we have the border with Afghanistan. And as you mentioned about this clash, it's happening all the time because of, as you know, the drug and also arms dealers sometimes. And that's why this can happen, because even today I heard that there was some battle, even clashes near the border. And that's why I think the future of Afghanistan, we are also here concerned, because about the like Tajikistan doesn't want Afghanistan should become a harbor for terrorist organizations, because we have this problem as well, the concern about the future Islamist groups. As also I wanted to mention, like in November last year, there was an attack at outpost. It was near the Tajik and Uzbek border. Also, the other concern is about the ISIS group, and there was confirmed. It was confirmed that the ISIS attacked this border post, and that's why I think Tajikistan alone can't control its border, and we rely on, of course, on CSTO. It is. I think we will discuss about it as well. And this CSTO, the mainly it's Russia. We have the Russian military base here in Tajikistan, and it's a kind of in the future how to control the border. It's very important. So yeah, I think about the political structure, about the Taliban, it depends totally on Afghan people. Of course, with the otherwise it's to develop trust, so we know that it will be restored in Afghanistan.
Thank you, Anaita. You did break in and out a little bit. So let's move on to our next panelist. Anaita, if I could ask you to please mute yourself. We're going to move on over to Dr. Sultan Akimbeko. I wanted to talk about the Kazakhstan perspective. So Kazakhstan supports the peaceful initiatives of the international community aimed at resolving the Afghan crisis. And I know they're actively participating in the Heart of Asia, the Istanbul process, and Kazakhstan extends its support to the Kabul process. Now, what is Kazakhstan's perspective regarding the Taliban and why? Dr. Akimbekov, you are on mute. Can you please unmute yourself?
Hello, is it? I am in, no?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for invitation for this webinar, and I'm sorry for technical reason because I can see you. And of course, very interesting question, very interesting question of Afghanistan situation, Central Asia relationship. And firstly, I'd like to say that for us nowadays, we are looking for Afghan situation from Central Asia as not only from security issues and not only the problem of threats from the radical Islamism from Taliban and others, maybe ISIS and others, but also as example, but also as maybe some example which shows us how it's possible to move in different ideas of development in such kind of countries. Because 70 years through the period of Soviet Union, we were excluded from the relationship with Muslim world, so that, and just nowadays we understand that all such kind of challenges which made, for example, Afghanistan with attempts to modernization process, and so a lot of different aspects. It means it's our problem because we nowadays have the same challenges because it's problem of modernization, Soviet process of modernization, process of American modernization. It's attempts to build something like democratical structure, which was but American policy. It's a result of American policy in Afghanistan nowadays. It's other problems. Especially very interesting aspect is that the inter-community relationship inside Afghanistan, because we have also in Central Asia region the same situation with communities, with even tribes maybe in some countries, and so that it means that for us all that process in Afghanistan very important in this situation. And of course, when we are looking of the situation nowadays, for us, it's a very important question because we don't know, because all situation depends from the American presence. This is an absolutely important factor nowadays. And if, for example, American disappeared one moment with the troops and stop financing American state apparatus and army and security forces, what does it mean? What will happen with Afghanistan? What will happen with us? Because, of course, all agreement, for example, with Taliban, of course, it's good, but maybe the problem of it's a problem not only the Emirates, not only the Islamic State construction in this situation, not only the problem of relationship between different communities of Afghanistan, ethnic groups, religious groups, and others, because situation is not so simple. We remember the 90s, we remember the contradiction between Pashtun and other ethnical minorities, and the support from outside of Afghanistan, from Pakistan, from Iran, from Russia, from others, and this was a very big war in this situation with a lot of contradiction now. But last 20 years, United States supported the idea not only financing the state structure in Afghanistan, but also United States plays the role of intermediate, maybe arbitrage, yes, in this situation. So that the United States supported the idea of republic in this case. So that if you are looking at Hazara minority, for example, in case of republic, Hazara minority have a very important role, because each election means that Hazara electorate is very important for all candidates to presidential election or maybe parliamentary election. And in the case of Emirates, it's understandable why our Iranian friend said that for Iran, it's absolutely important to continue that Afghanistan will continue to be republic. But what is the problem? That after the 20 years of American presence in Afghanistan, we have no just the institutions which enough for support of such kind of of sustainable political process in this situation. Because this political process or the situation, it's possible, will change very rapidly, because in the situation of contradiction between different groups will increase, and especially the United States also played role not only the arbitrage inside Afghanistan in intercommunal relation, but also outside Afghanistan, because in presence of United States, different role of Pakistan, of Iran, of Uzbekistan, of Russia, of others, because they need to maybe to hold back the position of United States, and so that. But if, for example, one moment United States will disappear, so that this is, what does it mean? It means that this is maybe restart such kind of contradiction and struggle. This is, for us, it's very important thing, I think. And of course, for Central Asian states, it's maybe just theoretically probably, because in all our countries, we have strong political powers. And we remember the situation of early 90s in Tajikistan, remember the situation in Kyrgyzstan through the second revolutions in this country. So that for all countries in our region, with some difficult differences, but supported the idea of strong political power. But this based also on the basis of we're afraid of any changes, because we remember, we can see on the situation of Afghanistan, it's for us, it's we're afraid of this situation. And of course, what will happen if, for example, United States tomorrow will disappear in this situation? It means that somebody will continue to finance Afghanistan state apparatus. This is a very important thing. But who it will possible? I don't know. Maybe Pakistan, they have no resources. Central Asian countries also. But of course, we supported the sustainable process in all. We participated in all attempts to in Kabul process, in Istanbul process, and others. But of course, in Kazakhstan especially, we have no resources enough for supporting the Afghan process in this situation. Without United States, it will be not possible at all. For example, Kazakhstan, among all other Central Asian countries, just one who financed some money for support building roads, bridges, some school, and also some support for the Afghan army according to the Chicago Conference agreement. And so that we participated in it, because in other countries, they have no such kind of possibilities. We understand it. So that if we have now refusing of United States to continue the support of Afghan government, it means that just who is possible? Just China, for example, possible, or maybe Russia. But what is very interesting in this situation, that Russian position very interesting, because Russia said that they said that from Afghanistan real threat. They said that we need to be ready for defend our borders from Afghan side. And if you remember the last 10 years, it's a lot of Russian representatives. They said, official representatives, they said that Afghanistan border is very dangerous, that some risks from the Islamic terrorism, from ISIS, from Taliban, and from others. And so that it's understandable why. Because for Russia, as we are, they have no money enough for supporting the idea of Afghanistan peaceful process. But Russia, and we, with Russia also, all Central Asian countries, we have something like Plan B. Because what does it mean? It means that we have organization of collective security. And so then we have regional anti-terroristic groups in Tashkent, RATS, and so that we are ready, maybe, in some elements of development. Because, of course, we know that Taliban declared that they have no aggressive plans to Central Asian state, but Russia said that it's possible. So that we, maybe, in some elements, supported such kind of idea, because we are maybe not, because our Tajik colleague said that for us, it's maybe very difficult to defend from such kind of threat from the south, which Russia now explained for us. But from other side, we understand that for Afghanistan peaceful process, the Afghanistan state needs maybe other resources, not from the United States, from the international community, but only one way to have such kind of resources is to establish something new, trade routes. And so that new trade routes to the south direction, to India, for example, to Pakistan, is maybe very progressive way to give all of us maybe a way to have net profit for financing, for example, Afghan government and all our needs also. And such kind of idea supported China also nowadays. And but just Russia not supported such kind of idea because they said that the regional security risks are more dangerous in this situation. And for Kazakhstan, for example, our position, we, as our colleague said, we are landlocked country, and Uzbekistan is twice landlocked country. In this case, we are absolutely interested in opening such kind of trade corridors to the south, because for Kazakhstan it means that if that we potentially have potential to be something like crossroads in the Central Eurasia. It's very profitable in the future situation, not only from China to Europe, but also from the north, from the Russia to the south, to Pakistan, India, and maybe to the sea. And for Uzbekistan, it's absolutely important situation, because for Uzbekistan economical model, they need maybe the less money expenditure for supplies, maybe, because it means that for them for transport needs, because for them it means that problem of of their economical model of this situation. And so that we I think that all our discussion, all our attempts to find something like a solution, it's concentrated just one question: what will happen with American presence in this situation? Will America continue their presence in some elements? Because from that depends the policy of Pakistan in this situation. From this policy of Iran also depends on this situation, because our Iran colleagues said that national integrity of Afghanistan will be the question in this situation. And another kind of problem that in Afghanistan, not only inside Afghanistan, not only the intercommunal contradictions like between different national groups, different religious groups, Hazara is Shia and Taliban is Sunni, but also the problem inside Sunni community, because Taliban represents a very archaical model of Deobandi Islam in this situation, and we could see the situation in the 90s, how they try to realize such kind of archaic model. And for example, in Kabul nowadays, a lot of politicians, not only from national minorities, but also from Pashtun, like Gulbuddin Hikmatyar, they were Islamic modernists, like Brotherhood from the Egypt, movement of Brotherhood, very close to Erdogan and others. And so that it's absolutely different. And the third force in this situation is traditional Sufi tariqa like Qadiriya, Naqshbandi, which presents not only in Afghanistan, but also in Uzbekistan and Central Asia states. So that it means that, of course, inside political Islamic movement, we have three groups of influence, and we don't know who is such kind of groups is maybe more have you them potential to have some decision, to find decision in this situation. And in our countries, we have the fourth group of this. This is Salafi movement. And Salafi movement maybe not so popular in Afghanistan, not so popular even in Pakistan, but Salafi movement nowadays very popular in Central Asian states. And this is for us is a real risk, because Salafi movement based on that through the period of Soviet Union, after the falling down Soviet Union, Central Asian states were something like tabula rasa, because we have no understanding of Islam, we have no practice, we have no ulemas, we have no nothing in this situation. And so that such kind of Salafi movement. Sorry, yes.
Dr. Kimbikov, thank you so much for that detailed information. It was quite it was very informative, and we really appreciate it. But I'm going to have to just cut you off and move to our final panelist. And I find it's okay. Could I please ask you to mute yourself? Thank you.
Sorry, because no answer from my gadget. I'm sorry.
I want to ask all the respective panelists to leave the information on sharing on Afghanistan to our Afghan panelists. I find it very important for you all to share perspectives from the countries that you are speaking in regards of, because that is the perspective that we need. Very little information on Afghanistan needed, because we have one of the most prestigious individuals that I have the honor to know, who's working in one of the most reputable organizations. Dr. Kimbikov, you haven't muted yourself. Could I please ask you to mute yourself? Mute, thank you. If I could have Suja. Yes, Dr. Kimbikov, now you're mute. Suja, could you please, you have the floor. I'm not going to place any questions for you. I think that the direction that the ONSC, the Afghan National Security Council, the National Security Advisor, is taking forward now in being very direct and speaking openly about all neighboring countries and how we should move forward with them. That's a new policy, something that I really do appreciate, and that's something that we need. We need to speak to each other rather than at each other. We need to be very clear in what we need, especially from our allies. So why don't you just explain the dynamic of Afghanistan right now, and speak to your colleagues here, and if feel free to ask questions if there's any comments that you wanted to respond to, because your perspective is the most important. Everything is on the future of Afghanistan, and I really hope that you are not offended at the title or between a republic and an emirate, because that is the discussion right now, and that is what the intra-Afghan negotiations will move forward. And it's really important for us to understand what our allies think of this, and how relevant are the Taliban. That's very important for us. So please just take the floor. However you wish to frame the discussion is up to you. And thank you for being so patient, for speaking last. I just wanted you to hear all of the perspectives and then give the floor to you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Vardak, for the very, very generous introduction, but also for giving me an open floor to respond and speak in any way that I want. I think I'll be respectful of the theme of the conversation and try to talk within the limits of what the webinar is about. It's certainly very enlightening to hear the perspectives from our region. I think this is a very timely webinar and panel, in the sense that what it does is it opens a window of insight into our northern neighbors. I'll tell you a short, very little personal story that I think is illuminating of what is going on. We all have become refugees in Iran. I'm speaking about the Afghan population. We've become refugees in India. We've become refugees in Pakistan. A lot of us have grown up in those countries, have received education in those countries. But sadly, there's been, comparatively speaking, very little cultural and people-to-people interactions with our Central Asian neighbors. And so when I actually had an opportunity to visit Tajikistan recently, last year, what it meant to me was, it was actually eye-opening in the many ways in which we have a common cultural commonalities with this particular region. There are linguistic, there are historic, there are people-to-people interactions. And so I mentioned this as a genuine sense of personal surprise, that even though we share very long borders with this region, there's very little that in terms of interaction that is happening with these countries. I say this because when I hear some of the concerns expressed by our panelists about what it means for the Taliban to come back, what it means for the Taliban and the emirate and their associations with regional terrorists, the cultural common sphere of Afghanistan and Central Asian countries means that we also share a common set of values. And the Taliban do not have a space in that common set of values with our countries. I'll tell you why that is. Even though the Taliban may have said they have no interest in attacking regional countries, but they have associations with the BIK, which is a designated terrorist group associated, made up primarily of Uzbek citizens, a breakaway faction of the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, which is also a designated terrorist organization, both by the UN, by the way. The Taliban are also associated with the Eastern Turkestan Islamic movement, which is another one of those terrorist organizations designated by the UN. So what you have is, even though the US Taliban deal obligates, or the Taliban commit to renouncing their ties with Al-Qaeda, which they have not done by now, but they also have a lot of these ties with other regional terrorist groups that directly threaten our neighbors to the north, and also our neighbor to the west, which is Iran. If you allow me to use this particular analogy, and I apologize for how superficial this might sound, but it does seem a la carte for the moment. But the Taliban are actually like coronavirus. When they invade a particular system, you never know what the effects are, because coronavirus could manifest itself in cardiovascular infarctions. It could manifest itself in respiratory problems. It could manifest itself in a brain hemorrhage and a tumor, a stroke. You never know how this virus, once it comes into this region, might actually destabilize everything that there is. The common cultural sphere that I spoke about in this region with Iran and Central Asia, the Taliban are alien to that common cultural sphere, because their ideology is actually much more aligned with the ideology of designated terrorist groups that are actively working to undermine our neighbors to the north, but also our neighbor to the west. That is the kind of problem we're faced with here. So even though the Taliban have only committed to cutting their ties with Al-Qaeda, something that they have not yet done, they must also do a number of other things for them to actually become acceptable as a reality in the politics of Afghanistan. One, they must also renounce their ties with these other regional terrorist groups, BIK, ETIM, IMU, and a number of other organizations, the Daesh to the north. But the problem with that is that even though other terrorist groups in other parts of the world have associations only ideological, but also operational, you share the same ideology as ISIS, you share the same supply chains for explosives materials, for weapons. But the Taliban actually share blood ties with these terrorist groups. And so when you're asking for the Taliban to renounce their ties with these terrorist groups, designated all of them, you must also look beyond what's operational and beyond what's ideological, even though those two things are extremely difficult in and of themselves. Here's the second thing that the Taliban must actually do in order to become acceptable, in order for us to be inoculated against this coronavirus. The second thing they must do is they must actually stop their links with transnational organized crime, which includes, but not is limited to, the drug smuggling cartels, the mafia, from which they receive a significant source of income, which threatens communities in Iran and Central Asia. They must also cut their ties with human smugglers and a number of other problems, a number of other bad actors in this region from which they receive sustenance and support, from which they receive operational capabilities. And so once they've done all of these three things, renounce ties with these terrorist organizations, renounce ties with transnational organized crime, renounce ties with human smuggling and other networks, then what they become is they actually become a possibly responsible actor, which could only and only be accommodated in a Republican system. Because any actor that has renounced all of those ties can only be accommodated in a Republican system, not in an emirate system, because an emirate system is ideologically alien to this region. It is something that is inconsistent from the democratic system in India to what we have in Iran, to the countries that we have in China and Central Asia. An emirate is ideologically inconsistent with all of them. So once you've renounced all of the ties that we talked about, then the only practical way for the Taliban to become part of a responsible state system is for them to actually integrate into a Republican system. And that is what the Afghan government is actually looking forward to. That is what we are struggling. So the fight that the Afghan government is doing is not just fighting on the battlefield to stand against the terrorism that is inflicted every day on the Afghan people, not just the fight against IMU, ETIM, BIK, ISIS, but also a fight for the ideological soul of this region. Because the alien virus of emirate is inconsistent with this region. So in that respect, we're actually looking looking forward to, and we hope to receive the support of our regional countries, because Afghanistan actually has embarked on a very ambitious but also very committed regional strategy so that we could actually build a common consensus with the countries of the region with whom we share a common cultural sphere, but also shared strategic and economic interests, which includes CASA 1000, which includes TAP, which includes TAPI, which includes access to war motor ports in India and Iran, which includes all of these. So our regional approach is really aimed at harnessing these cultural commonalities, but also the geostrategic and economic interests that bind these countries together. And we have received very, very positive reactions so far from the regional countries. And I think you saw some very positive statements from some of the panelists today, including from Mr. Nemetov, whom I commend for his very well thought out statement earlier on. I think what I might do is I might actually stop right there, because we're probably running out of time before we start the Q&A. Happy to answer any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm very, this is the first of its kind where I have been able to, not even a host, but I mean to be a part of the Central Asian and Iran perspective. And I think that we should hold one of Central Asia, South Asia, and all our other neighbors should hold one another accountable, just as one does in a typical neighborhood. And we should talk more commonly in regards to how we're going to move forward. Politics aside, Taliban have become some sort of reality, and they are not the best reality right now. They bring a baggage with them, and that baggage is their connection to other terrorist groups. Their baggage is the type of framework that they want to move forward in. Now, my question is going to go back in the same order that we had started with. We're going to go to Adnan. How do you propose that Iran, with the struggles that it's facing right now with the United States, and the United States being one of Afghanistan's closest ally, how should Afghanistan move forward in regards to the discussion that we have in Emirates and in a republic? I know that Iran is pushing for it to be a republic. So how should Iran, what contributions could Iran make to push this forward is probably what I'm looking for.
Thank you for this, Mariam. And I already learned a lot from all the contributions, and it was particularly a pleasure to listen to you, Ahmad Shuja. That was very enlightening.
Please feel free to talk to other panelists or make remarks to any other statements that you had. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. This goes to all of the panelists, because after this round, it will be the Q&A and we will end the session.
All right. Well, since we are focusing on Afghanistan, I think I will mainly direct this back to yourself and to Ahmad Shuja. While listening to everyone, I was really thinking that it will end up being the economic development of Afghanistan, as it is the case everywhere else. Obviously, Afghanistan is one of a kind as a context, but in the end, it's really about the economic prosperity, or at least to some extent a decent living that everyone is entitled to and everyone is seeking. And the more we find, this sounds so general, but I really think it's important. The more we find regions of Afghanistan being not only somewhat stable, but also able to present economic development to some extent, the less radical forces of any color will have a chance to attract more people. The less the Taliban will broaden the circle of their influence. And slight disagreement here. I know that this analogy with the virus is not really what you feel well with, but I also really think that we shouldn't use it. It doesn't end well when we start comparing human beings to viruses, regardless of how little we think of their ideological and overall approach. And
I think, can I just, I'm very sorry to interrupt her. I think there may have been a misunderstanding. I'm not comparing human beings with a virus. I'm actually comparing the ideological effect of the Taliban and an emirate in this region. There's an incompatibility of the emirate to the region, which is akin to the introduction of a virus to a human body. I'm not comparing a person to a virus. I know it's an analogy that's imperfect inherently, but I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
No, it's absolutely fair enough, and I don't want to be seen as someone who is defending the Taliban here either. So let's leave it at that. And I, however, for the sake of more controversy, let's also say that maybe there is this reality in our region that there are tendencies towards that type of ideology. It's not people that came from the moon or from some laboratory where this ideological virus could suddenly disappear from. So I think in order to tackle this phenomenon, this problem, this, let's say, political disease properly, we have to call it as it is. And I think that the more Iran can play its role in fostering what it seeks, better trade relations to Afghanistan, seeking access to Central Asia through Afghanistan, while at the same time allowing Afghanistan connectivity to the Persian Gulf. And I think it was only yesterday or the day before yesterday that the governor of the Iranian Khorasan province announced that the railway between Kaf and Herat is going to be completed by the end of the Iranian year, which is March 21. So these are signs that the overall strategy for Iran is to see Afghanistan flourish economically. And I saw in the chat the question about what the countries of the region view to be India's role. And I really think from what I hear in the Iranian discourse, they see India as being the big powerhouse that could help and boost economic development in Afghanistan. I'm too ignorant to understand whether that's a tangible way to go forward. But I think Iran's most positive role could be to help and to seek its own convergence of interest with Afghanistan in its own right to seek economic development, but to also, as the Chabahar port was aimed at, to seek economic integration with other neighbors of Afghanistan.
Thank you so much, Adnan. I totally enjoyed watching you and Suja engage here. I really appreciate all the panelists and all our attendees with the questions. And thank you so much for including India's role. I'm going to move to Mr. Nemetov. I wanted to ask you what recommendation you have moving forward, and how do you see India's role in this dynamic? As it was one of the questions from the attendees, it would be great to hear your perspective on this.
So I'm sorry, my English is not so fluently. I have learned English at school, but it was a long time ago.
No, your English is superb. We really appreciate it.
If you allow me, I will ask my colleagues to translate and to help me to expose my opinion. Я думаю, что Индия играет очень важную роль.
India plays a very important role in Afghanistan.
Мы знаем, что Индия является одним из крупных доноров.
One of the biggest donors.
Более 3 миллиардов долларов за все эти годы Индия вложила в мирное восстановление Афганистана.
India invests more than $3 billion to the socio-economic reconstruction of Afghanistan.
Участвует, активно участвует в подготовке национальных кадров для экономики Афганистана.
India is very active in preparing the national cadres for Afghanistan.
И, конечно же, Индия – это огромный рынок, это 1,5 миллиарда людей.
India is a big market for Afghanistan.
И не только для Афганистана, для Центральной Азии, для Афганистана.
Not only for Afghanistan, for Central Asia also.
Это динамично развивающаяся экономика.
It's a very dynamically developing economy.
И мы хотели бы, конечно, чтобы Афганистан служил своего рода наземным мостом между как бы Индией и Центральной Азией.
We want to see the Afghanistan as a trans boundary for connecting India and Central Asia.
И, конечно, не вовлекая Индию, нельзя добиться мирного восстановления Афганистана.
We cannot reconstruct Afghanistan without the India's participation.
Более того, но не могу не упомянуть и конфликт между Пакистаном и Индией.
In this case, I want to share my opinion about the conflict between Pakistan and India.
Да, я думаю, вот мир в Афганистане, в том числе зависит и от взаимоотношений Индии и Пакистана.
The peace in Afghanistan also depends on the solution of the conflict between the India and Pakistan.
И именно поэтому Узбекистан выступает за реализацию трансрегиональных проектов в сфере экономики, транспорта.
In this case, Uzbekistan is for the realization of transport, energy, and other projects, transboundary projects,
которые обеспечат взаимосвязанность между Южной Азией и Центральной Азией.
Which can play as a connectivity role between the Central Asia and South Asia.
Например, транспортные коммуникации, которые могли бы связать Южную Азию, я имею в виду Индию, и Центральную Азию, через Пакистан, через Индию, через Афганистан.
The transport communication projects between Central Asia and South Asia.
Да, или же проект в сфере энергетики. Это и газопроводы через Афганистан, Пакистан в Индию.
Also the energetic projects between Central Asia and South Asia, which goes through Central Asian countries to Pakistan and India.
Я думаю, что вот эти проекты, крупные проекты или программы энергетического развития, они принесут выгоду всем странам.
These projects, energy projects and other projects will contribute to the development of not only for all countries, they are beneficial for all countries.
И они могли бы выступать именно, они могли бы способствовать достижению консенсуса между Афганистаном, Узбекистаном, Центральной Азией, Пакистаном и Индией о необходимости мира в Афганистане.
These projects can also play a kind of consensus for Afghanistan, Central Asian countries, and South Asian countries, India and Pakistan.
Поэтому я считаю, что роль Индии очень важна, и она должна играть активную роль в тех усилиях, которые сегодня предпринимаются международным сообществом по достижению мира в Афганистане.
In this context, I think the India's role is very important, and it's very important also for the international community and India's role in consolidating the efforts of international community.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nemetov. I really appreciate your perspective. I know, Nehita, I'm supposed to go to you, but because we're having some technical difficulties with Dr. Akimbekov, Sultan Akimbekov, I'm going to direct my question to him, and then I will come to you. Dr. Sultan Akimbekov, there was a question out with our attendees that what do they see India's role in Afghanistan? But my question to you is, what recommendation do you have moving forward regarding the challenges that you see in Central Asia, especially in regards to your respective country in Afghanistan. If we can keep it brief, please. Thank you. Can you please unmute yourself, Dr. Akimbekov?
I am so sorry for this technical waste. Thank you for your question. From my point of view, what about the India's role? It's important, especially in the last tendency, because last maybe 10 years we have contacts, because the very active role of China in this Central Asian, Afghanistan and Pakistan process, so that nowadays India's relationship with China and Pakistan is not so good. But if we don't look on these circumstances, it means that India played a main role in Shanghai Organization of Cooperation. Because if United States will withdraw from the Afghanistan, it means, or from region, I don't know, it means that around Afghanistan we can see the Shanghai Organization, maybe just Iran not the member of this organization. It means that they have chance to participate in deciding the situation in Afghanistan. And India played a main role, especially in this situation, especially with relationship in Pakistan, as our colleague said, because you know that Pakistan, a lot of policy of Pakistan through the 90s, and we was connected with supporting the Taliban, and we remember the Pakistan intelligence service supported the Taliban appearance. But in this case, it means that radicalization of relationship between India, Pakistan, China, and potential perspectives of withdrawal of the United States, it means that the tension in the region will increasing. And for all of us, is deciding the problems, the relationship between all different countries, all participants of these local, regional powers. It's absolutely important for any attempts to decide the problems of Afghanistan. And of course, economical issues, yes, absolutely, because we remember the Trans-Afghan gas pipeline project. It's not to Pakistan, just to India. Also, we remember the South Sea for our region is absolutely important thing, and so on and so forth. But from my point of view, nowadays it's like Edward Ludwig said, geoeconomical situation. This is not geopolitical, just geoeconomical, not economical also. And from other side, from my point of view, what is main idea in this situation? What is very important that Taliban, we know Taliban, that this is the organization. We know that Taliban is not the organization like maybe Hezbollah or Hamas in Lebanon. This is like a multiple brand, like umbrella brand. And it means that the role of Pakistan in this organization, supporting this organization, and we, I think in this situation, the main idea is that Pakistan will not force Taliban forces maybe to be more active, to be more aggressive inside Afghanistan policy, because it's possible to save the republic in this country just in case it's some cooperation inside between different groups. But what about the Taliban position of Pakistan nowadays? And maybe not in all aspects, but maybe in most of them. And so that it's absolutely important in this situation. Sorry, yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akimbekov. If I could please ask you to mute yourself. And we're going to move to Anita. Anita, as a journalist on the ground, speaking with other citizens. Dr. Akimbekov, could you please put yourself on mute? Thank you.
Yes.
Anita, so why don't you give us what you think that your recommendation is on moving forward with the current crisis that we see, and also what role do you think, or does Tajikistan perceive India's role in Afghanistan and in our region, and how we can tackle certain issues together?
Yeah, thank you, Mariam. So about the ideology of Taliban, as my colleagues talked, as you know, Tajikistan is a secular country. So I think it's very important for us, like inside of Tajikistan, to have this structure. But what about the Afghan conflict? As we know, there are so many actors as international, regional, and it's very complicated. That's why I think there is need of political will of different actors and to have a consensus. That's why, again, for example, as my colleague from Afghanistan said, we have the longest border. Again, about people to people diplomacy is very important as well, because here in Tajikistan, we have like more than 4,000 of Afghan refugees. So as you mentioned, it's like when we talk the same language. Our cultures are so similar. So I think it's really important for us to talk to each other. So about that's why the future of Afghanistan, I want to be very positive, but I think it's very unclear, unfortunately. So I hope it won't be like it was after the Soviet Union left Afghanistan, because we know that crisis, like now it's almost 19 years old, like years is going on. And even my father was in Afghanistan. I have very personal, story, because he was in Afghanistan, in Kabul, even 3 years during the Soviet Union. So the other question about India, we shouldn't forget about Russia and China. And as my colleague from Kazakhstan mentioned, yes, China is very active in Tajikistan, and there were like reports you heard, like in Badakhshan, there is a Chinese kind of military, we can't call it base, but there is a military unit. So I think India here, I know like India wanted to use the Aini air base in Dushanbe, also helped to reconstruct this air base. But if you compare China with India, India has a really great potential. But I think now if you compare with China, it's kind of uncomparable, because still we have this kind of traditional areas like in Central Asia, we say, or like especially in Tajikistan, Russia takes care of security and military issues, and China mostly it's about economic development, infrastructure. So yes, India, I don't think India has this kind of prominent role, but maybe I think it's increasing now with the situation. So there should be a counterbalance, and I think India has a lot of potential. Yeah.
Can I
Thank you
really
so much.
quickly jump in here with two stories and one comment? I'm sorry, I just have to say this in response to what we just heard from Ms. Anahita. In Dushanbe, there is a store that sells music and CDs. In that store, literally every day that I was in that city, the person blared music from Ahmad Zahir, popularly known in the West as the Elvis of Afghanistan. Here we know him as Ahmad Zahir of Afghanistan. They blared Sarban, one of the classical, not classical, but one of the older sort of singers that I love. And I actually one time ventured to go into this shop and I asked him, why are you playing this music? This is my country's music. And he said, well, I grew up on this music. And he told the story of how when he was a young child growing up in Dushanbe, his sister was actually a nurse in Afghanistan. And every time she visited Tajikistan back, she would actually bring cassettes of Ahmad Zahir and Sarban and others. So this was eye-opening to me, but what was more eye-opening was I actually met somebody who, when we were having a conversation, he actually showed some of the scars on his back. And I asked him, what are these scars from? And he said, I was actually deployed under the Soviets to fight in battle. I went there and I saw the people, they spoke like me and they worshiped like me, and I didn't want to fight them. So the scars you see are from my commanders hitting me so I can actually fight. And so when I talk about there's a common cultural sphere in this region, those are the commonalities that we're talking about, right? And if we sort of move away a little bit from the cultural commonalities, there is a particular, if 5 years ago, if you actually spoke about negotiations with the Taliban or peace with the Taliban, you would hardly have any political actor in this country who is serious enough who would support that idea. they were dead set against that idea. President Karzai had a very difficult time and ran into a lot of controversies as the prime advocate for this idea. 5 years down the road, today, you do not have any serious political actor who actually opposes peace talks with the Taliban. And so there is a consensus in Afghanistan on peace. And there is a consensus in Afghanistan on the need to engage directly with the Taliban. And all of these serious political actors are actually either part of the negotiating team, or their political party has a member on the negotiating team, or they are on the High Council for National Reconciliation. So everybody in Afghanistan who is not the Taliban is actually on board, A, with the notion for the need for peace, and B, for the need to engage the Taliban directly in negotiations on peace, and C, actually to preserve what we have in this constitution, even though there is a need for flexibility on all sides for peace to come and for this conflict to end, because 20 years of conflict cannot be ended if you're intransigent and not flexible. Thank you.
So as we witnessed, when you see how our panelist from Afghanistan just took his role and communicated directly with all of the other panelists, and this is what we want to see, how Afghanistan will act in the future as well. Kabir, you have been such a silent co-moderator. Do you have anything to say, especially to our distinguished panelists or to the main speaker of the day, evening, night, wherever anybody is, Ahmed Shuja? Please.
Thanks, Mariam. I actually would rather not get into, there are a lot of questions about India, of course, but I would rather not get into it because that's been discussed enough as it is. But I do think that it will not be a bad thing that a lot of these debates, especially based on Central Asian states and their sort of role in Afghanistan, be more publicly available in India as well. They are not publicly available in India. So it seems like a very distant debate, what you guys are having right now. And that's not how it should be. We had a couple of questions, of course, on and comments on India's role there. I will just say that there was a brief mention of India being one of the largest sort of providing some of the largest aid to Afghanistan, economic aid to Afghanistan. I think around $3 billion and so on. And we've been hearing this this figure for a long time. I think there's capacity to be done much more. $3 billion is not a whole lot when it comes to reconstruction of an entire country that has been ravaged by war. And I do hope India steps up to the occasion now, and specifically economically, and which we have seen. We've seen some great stuff happening with the air corridor happening between India and Afghanistan. Chabahar, I have been a critic of Chabahar only because of how India and Iran handled it, not because of what potential it actually it gives out. But overall, what debates we had today, I really hope more of it is publicly available to an Indian audience, which is very interested in Afghanistan as well. That's all.
Thank you so much. I want to emphasize that Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Iran, many other nations, Pakistan, they're all very important to how Afghanistan is going to be moving forward. And we need to hold these kind of discussions more often. So I thank ORF again for partnering up with Her Afghanistan to have these discussions. This is the third session of the series that we had, and we are very grateful. We had our panelists also engage in the chat group, so thank you for your activities. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to end it because it's been a long session as it is, and especially my gratitude to Ahmed Shuja, because at times like these, it's very hard to defend your perspective, the Afghan government's perspective, because there's so many blurred lines right now, and it is a heated discussion, and you are engineering the way forward and how you project Afghanistan's perspective is very much appreciated. So thank you very much, everybody. I will let you go off to your dinners, lunches, and breakfasts. Take care.
Thank you.